This is Chapter 5, the Integumentary System, Section 1, where we're going to talk about the different layers of the skin. So our learning outcomes are to describe the main structural features of the epidermis and explain the functional significance of each. This section will be done on the second video. So today we're just going to talk about the epidermis and the dermis. So in the integumentary system, it includes all your skin, hair, and nails, and glands that are connected to those. So it is called the skin or the integument, and it's about 16% of your total body weight. It's the one of the only organs you can actually see. And the main purpose is it's your body's first line of defense against the environment. So it protects you against mechanical and chemical stress. The two major components are the cutaneous membrane, which is combined the epidermis and the dermis. So when you're looking at your skin, you can see the epidermis, and underneath the epidermis is your dermis. You cannot see your dermis on your skin. And then the accessory structures we'll talk about in the third section, and those include your hair, your glands, and your nails. So in the cutaneous membrane layers, we have, again, the epidermis and the dermis. So remembering that epi means above or on from our PRS quizzes. And the epidermis is stratified. Stratified means layers. So there's between 4 and 5 layers of the epidermis, depending on what type of skin you're talking about. And the type of cells that the epidermis is made up of is squamous epithelium. The dermis underneath the epidermis is 2 layers. And the first one is the papillary layer, made up of areolar connective tissue. And then the second layer is the reticular layer, made of dense irregular connective tissue. So there's elastin fibers in there to keep your skin in the shape that it's supposed to be. There's muscles in there. So that's the underneath part of your epidermis. And then below that is the hypodermis. But technically the hypodermis is not a part of the integument system, but it is below it. And it kind of shares that same name with the dermis. And it's mostly fat cells. So a fat cell is called an adipocyte or fat tissue, and it acts as insulation to keep our body temperatures regulated. Because remember, your skin is part of regulating body temperature through the secretion of sweat to cool you off if you get too hot. So again, we have the epidermis on top, the dermis below that, and then even below that, we have the hypodermis, even though technically this is not part of the integument. The accessory structures we will talk about later on in the next section. So you have your hair, shaft, and follicle, you have sweat glands, we have tactile and lamellated corpuscles, which help to show you that there's touching and pressure sensors within your skin. Sebaceous glands, which secrete this waxy substance. The erector pili muscle, which is responsible for creating goosebumps, which is connected to a hair follicle. Then you have nerve fibers, and then a cutaneous plexus, which is your network of blood vessels, which is going to provide coloration for your skin and blood. So this is an overview of a cross section of your skin. So up here, the tan part, this is the part that you can see. So this is your epidermis up here, and the epidermis goes all the way down to this purple section right here. So the bottom purple section is also part of the epidermis. And then underneath the purple section, this kind of like pink, light pink section, this is your dermis. So pink, light pink is dermis. Tan and purple is epidermis. And then below here, this is your hypodermis, where your fat and your major veins are. So this is technically not part of the integument, but this is where it is. So these are hair, pieces of hairs, and these are the hair going into the hair follicle, which is this purple thing that surrounds this hair. This is your sebaceous gland over here. This is going to produce a waxy substance to keep your hair looking shiny and so that it doesn't get stuck. It lubricates it so it doesn't get stuck as it goes up through the pore. This is that erector pili muscle that would contract this and cause your hair to stand up straight and give you goosebumps. And then you can see we have some of the tactile corpuscles and the lamellated corpuscle for touch and pressure. And we have sweat glands here that go to the surface, and we have these nerve fibers and blood vessels as well. So lots of functions of the integumentary system, protecting the body's internal living tissues and organs, protecting against invasion by infectious organisms, protects the body from dehydration, protects the body against abrupt changes in temperature. We have the adipose cells, and we have sweat to keep us warm and cool us off. Disposes of waste materials, like through your sweat, you can dispose of materials that way. Acts as a receptor for touch, pressure, pain, heat, and cold. It stores water and fat. That's the hypodermis area that stores the fat. And then synthesis of vitamin D3. That is a very important vitamin that your bodies need. And it's synthesized in your epidermis with use of your melanocytes. All right, so in the epidermis, it is dominated by the most abundant epithelial cells. So most of the epithelial cells in your body are in your epidermis. They also have keratinocytes. Keratin is produced in these keratinocytes, a type of cell, and it is there to keep things strong. So keratin is a protein that's produced in these epithelial cells on your skin. The epidermis cells are continuously produced in the deepest layers. So your new skin cells are produced on the bottom layer, the deepest layer of your epidermis, and then they move up towards the surface, towards the superficial area, through either 4 or 5 layers of skin, and then they're shed on the top layer of your skin. So all the skin that you can see right now are actually dead skin cells, and they're being shed off. You can't really see them happening all the time. I mean, sometimes you can, but most of the time you don't see them being shed off. So the several layers we're talking about are either 4 or 5 layers. The deep layer of the epidermis, the deepest part, forms an epidermal ridge. And then that ridge binds to dermal papilla, which is a nipple-shaped mound of the dermis. So if we go back to this here, see these bottom purple things here? So we have the epidermal ridge is the bottom purple part, and then it connects to the light pink part is called the papillary, right there. Okay, so those are the 2 layers, and there's another picture we'll show as well. So most of your body is covered with 4 layers, and that's called thin skin. So most of your body has only 4 layers of skin. The palms of your hands and the soles of your feet have 5 layers of skin, and so that's called thick skin. So palms of your hands and soles of your feet, and if you think about it, those are the areas that have the most mechanical stress and chemical. You're using them to touch everything, to walk on, so they have an extra layer called the stratum lucidum that your thin skin does not have. So here's a cross-section of thin skin. So here's your dermis, and then here's your epidermis. Here's those papillary and dermal ridge right here. And then your epidermis is right here. And so you can see that it's thinner. And this is the top layer of your skin. This is what we can see right now. And then over here with your thick skin, again, on the palms of your hands or the soles of your feet, you can see the epidermal ridge here. So this bottom layer is the epidermal ridge, all right here, epidermal ridge. And then the dermal papilla is the connecting piece in the dermis. So this is the dermal papilla, this is the dermal papilla, this is the epidermal ridge, epidermal ridge. This is a very thick part of stratum corneum, the top layer of your skin, and the 5th layer is actually a thin layer. It's called the stratum lucidum, and it's like a clear layer in between right here. So this clearish layer right here that you can see part of over here, this is the 5th layer of skin. And so then on thick skin, you also have lots more layers of the top layer of skin called the stratum corneum. And in the thin skin, you don't have as many layers here. So this is just a clip art of that. And so here is the dermal papilla. So this is the top part, kind of like the mountains of the dermis. And that connects with the like reverse mountains on the epidermis. And they fit together kind of like an egg crate mattress topper. If you've ever had one of those, you know it kind of looks like this. Imagine if we had another egg crate that fit over on top of it to make it a flat piece here. That's what it would be like. So the epidermal ridge here binds to the dermal papilla underneath here. And so this is the epidermis, and then this is the dermis underneath. So the layers of the epidermis, the top layer, the one that you can see on your skin, is called the stratum corneum. And it's the outermost protective layer. It's our first line of defense. It has 15 to 30 layers of keratinized cells, which are filled with keratin, and they're all dead cells. All of them are dead. And they remain on that top layer in the stratum corneum for about 2 weeks before they're shed off and replaced with layers of skin below it. The second layer, this is the one that's only in thick skin, is called the stratum lucidum. And so lucidum kind of means like lucid, like clear, seeing clearly. It separates the stratum corneum, the top most superficial layer, from the underlying layers. And the next one is stratum granulosum. So the stratum lucidum would be between the stratum corneum and the stratum granulosum, which will be on the next page. And they're flattened dead cells filled with keratin proteins. So underneath the stratum lucidum in thick skin, or if we're talking about thin skin, we don't have stratum lucidum, we would just start with stratum corneum and then go to stratum granulosum. It means the grainy layer. And there's going to be 3 to 5 layers of keratinocytes. And these are living. So the stratum granulosum ones are still alive, but they've stopped dividing and they've started making keratin. So the keratin is made in the stratum granulosum. They have stopped dividing and started making keratin, again, which is that protein that provides strength. So as the protein fibers develop, membranes become less permeable and they're more waterproof. So this is why we can be outside in the rain and not melt because of our stratum granulosum. So underneath the stratum granulosum is the stratum spinosum. It's the spiny layer. So some of the cells look like they have little like spines coming out of them, like little protrusions. So it's about 8 to 10 layers of live keratinocytes bound by desmosomes. These are things that connect adjacent cells to the ones next to them. And the cells look spiny when we look at histological sections, which is just a fancy way of looking at it underneath the microscope. So we'll see some of those. And the dendritic cells or immune system cells can also be found in the stratum spinosum, and they are going to help to defend against the pathogens and superficial cancers. And then below the stratum spinosum, we have our final, most deep layer of skin called the stratum basal. So they're basal cells, which are also known as stem cells. And stem cells are special because they can turn into any other type of cell. So these stem cells are going to turn into epithelial cells, squamous epithelial cells, and they're attached to the basal lamina, which just means the base layer of the skin, of the epidermis. They are always dividing and replacing the lost cells. So like we said, when you get to the stratum corneum, they stay there for about 2 weeks, even though they're already dead, and then they flake off. Well, you can't completely flake off your skin. You have to have that skin replaced by something. So the stratum basal is always making new cells and always pushing them up. So the stratum basal cells eventually get pushed up to become the stratum spinosum cells, which get pushed up to become the stratum granulosum cells, which get pushed up to become either the stratum lucidum in thick skin or just up to the stratum corneum in the thin skin. So they start at the base, they start at the bottom of the epidermis in stratum basal, and then they get pushed up as new cells are being made at on the basal lamina. And then this is where your Merkel cells or your touch receptors are found here as well. When we start talking about melanocytes, which is the type of cell that creates pigment, melanin to make your skin colored, different colors, they'll be in this stratum basal as well. So here we've got our 5 layers. So our largest layer is the stratum corneum, and we know we're looking at thick skin because we have 5 layers: stratum corneum, stratum lucidum, stratum granulosum, stratum spinosum, and stratum basal. If this was thin skin, then we wouldn't have the lucidum here. So the lucidum, the presence of the stratum lucidum, indicates that this is thick skin, and it can be found on the sole of your feet and the palms of your hands. So again, this is all the corneum. This is this clear layer, the lucidum. It's thin. Then we have stratum granulosum, stratum spinosum here, and then the very bottom layer of all of this is stratum basal. So this very bottom layer of cells here is the stratum basal. So this also creates the epidermal ridge that connects to the dermal papilla. Okay, so the epidermal ridges are made up of the stratum basal, and it connects to the dermal papilla. And these are a couple questions that we have, and you will find them also in your review section. So we will stop here.